This is Agriculture Research Council of Nigerian Television. My name is Joshua Ishaya, and of course, the program is Aqua Farming. Aqua Farming is a program that brings to you all you need to know that is in the water, be it crab, shells, frogs, or whatsoever it is that is in the water. And today, Aqua Farming tends to be very interesting. More reason you can even see, in fact, the background in which I am is quite different from any other background. And today, we'll be talking about seaweeds. Seaweeds are weeds that are grown in oceans so as to create food and employment to teeming unemployment people around the world. And today on Aqua Farming, we'll be looking at seaweeds, its economic importance to Nigeria, and how people can tap into this very virgin sector in the aquatic, or rather in the blue economy, so as to create employment in Nigeria. So stay tuned as we're taking you once again on the topic seaweed farming in Nigeria. Stay with us.
Seaweed is one of the aspects of aquaculture that gained considerable recognition over the years for its enormous growth potential, especially at a time when global resources are increasingly overstretched. The World Wildlife Fund for Nature, a Swiss-based international non-governmental organization, describes seaweed farming as an efficient and innovative way of producing highly nutritious food for a growing world population, supported by the fact that it grows rapidly and doesn't require fertilizer, pesticides, freshwater, or land, while also creating new habitat for a diversity of marine life. Research has shown that commercial seaweed aquaculture started earnestly on only about half a century ago, but the production volume have recorded rapid growth and triples in the last 20 years. According to market data forecast, the global seaweed cultivation market stood at 16.7 billion naira in 2022 and is estimated to reach a valuation of $30.2 billion by the end of 2028, with a compound annual growth rate of 12.6% between 2023 and 2028. In a study titled Global Seaweed New and Emerging Market Report 2023, the World Bank said, seaweed farming demonstrates how development, climate, and nature work together to generate value and uplift communities. This is explained and buoyed by its ability to sink carbon, sustain marine biodiversity, employ women, and unlock value chains. The World Bank report identified 10 global seaweed markets with the potential to grow by an additional 11.8 billion naira by 2030. However, it noted that much of the seaweed sector's value remains untapped, being that it was clear growth potential beyond its current markets. Commenting on this, World Bank Global Director for Environment, Natural Resources and Blue Economy said, growth in seaweed farming across the world will depend on sharing technology and knowledge between policymakers, financing institutions, the scientific community, the private sector, producers, and predecessors, leaving no one behind, with women dominant in seaweed farming. This stage is set for catalyzing a truly global seaweed revolution. According to the World Bank, most farm seaweed is used for direct human consumption as fresh feed in aquaculture or as hydrocolloids. Going forward, he stated that seaweed farmed products can provide raw materials for a wide range of applications due to their diverse composition, may be able to displace fossil fuels in sectors such as fabrics and plastics, can provide ecosystem services such as carbon sequestration and nitrogen cycling, and can generate socio-economic benefits in fragile coastal communities. Hence, diversification into seaweed farming, among other activities, is suggested to be a more pragmatic option to overcome large-scale ecological and global market changes. In view of this, experts said seaweed could become an important economic niche for Nigeria, especially in the coastal region, provided adequate research is undertaken studying their diversity, biochemical composition, and potential for culture in order to harness the enormous opportunities which can be derived. Despite the fact that Nigeria is yet to gain significant recognition as a top seaweed producer, experts believe the country with a coastline of 860 kilometers extending from the border with Benin in the west and Cameroon in the east can still play an active role as a raw material supplier and producer, given the anticipated high demand for seaweeds, which guarantee relatively high market value. They also emphasize that the growing significance of seaweed cultivation in the world is a promising start toward realizing the goals of becoming a producer and enhancing the socio-economic benefit to be gained from establishing a seaweed sector. Development of seaweed sector in the country will not only improve the standard of living and alleviate poverty, and also help to control rural-urban drift in many brackish water and coastal communities where fish, a major aquatic resource, is considerably overexploited. In a research article authored with other academic experts, Seaweed Resources of Sluggish Culture and Utilization in West Africa, a case study of Nigeria noted that seaweed cultivation can easily be integrated with the traditional activities of fishing. Alternatively, employment or additional income outside fisheries has often been mentioned as a panacea to help high fishing-dependent communities tide over a period of loss of income resulting from declining fish catch. Considerable empirical evidence suggests that seaweed farming is a profitable venture for coastal households, highlighting the challenges of the exploitation, culture, and utilization of potential seaweed resources in Nigeria. Research has shown that while the poor status of natural occurring seaweed may present a daunting task to their exploitation and utilization, the paucity of information on these resources poses a more daring challenge. Therefore, it stated that taxonomic and population biology besides quantitative assessment will be required to estimate the field stock value of seaweeds before commercial harvest. Logistics, labor marketing, processing, shipping, cost, and utilization of the wild stock could be considered. The research article noted that enhancing the full potential of seaweed resources also implies basic research and economic viable species aimed at creating genetically improved and novel strains with increased yield and the capacity for producing new substances. Furthermore, if commercial quantities of potential seaweed species have been established in our environment, then these portend important consequences for conservation and coastal management. Alternatively, the option of transplantation and cultivation of commercially viable exotic species should be given serious consideration on the basis of a higher profitability of success arising from similarities in ecological conditions in Nigeria and the exporting countries. It added, according to the federal government in Nigeria, a pivotal role to play as a facilitator and regulator to make feasible an evolution of a seaweed sector as a fishery subsector, which should be seen as the first step towards marine agronomy. It also called on government to support the development of seaweed cottage industries in country and also promote funding for research and public enlightenment campaigns to sensitize the coastal communities and country at large on the socio-economic benefit to be derived. The article also challenged tertiary institutions, the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, and other affiliated research institutes in proximity of brackish water and coastal environment to undertake and develop seaweed research, and that approach to conduct of research should be multidisciplinary to optimize funds and other resources required, which may be timing. Seaweed cultivation is regarded as an activity conducted near to the coastal area and is largely environmental basis and often conducted by the community in that area. The term seaweed, according to the native language, is sagu hajo or green vegetables, which are source of food for the traditional people in past centuries in Asia. Other than that, Asian countries became important agents in producing and marketing the seaweed to other countries in the world. In Southeast Asian countries like Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, namely, Sabah seaweed species which are commonly being cultivated are kappa and ukema. They are then exported to other countries. There are several seaweed species which are largely being cultivated by communities on the coast of Malaysia. In Peninsula Malaysia, seaweed species like koh lepa, saga, and alvari commonly produced by community in the coast, especially fishermen. In Sabah, seaweed species like kappa and ikema are only cultivated by the community in the coast. Seaweed cultivation in Sabah is mainly being focused in Sempoma, which occupies 7,586 hectares of coastal area. Now, let's look at the farming techniques of seaweed. Seaweed is usually farmed in the shallow antecedent areas which are frequent flushing of water for good growth. Farming is done during spring low tides when the tide is out. At this time, the water level is about 1 foot to 1.5 feet. The seaweed needs to be submerged all the time to avoid excessive export that can lead to stress and thus disease signs. When the tide comes in, the farmers have to go out to the farms and carry the harvested seaweed home. Areas suitable for farming are those with sandy substratum to enable the fixing of wooden pegs in the substratum. A new technique of farming in deeper water has been introduced. We will discuss it here on the program Aqua Farming. For ideal seaweed farming areas, the water is usually clean, free from pollution, and top duty as the seaweed farm are sensitive to pollution and need enough sunlight for growth. Entry to seaweed farming is free access. Any person can go into the sea and start a farm where there is space. The farmed area then will belong to the farmer. The rural modesty of the farmer helps in protecting each other's farms and farming areas against any intruder. People from the same village area can give a farming space to a fellow villager. Usually farmers do the farming in the same area where they live. Someone from other area can ask for farming space from the farmers of a particular area. There are no licenses or seabed land purchase. The method of seaweed farming in the shallow intertidal area is referred to as peg with line of off-button method. In the method, nylon ropes with seaweed are tied between two wooden pegs. The pegs are from mangroves or land-based plants. In this method, seaweed branches are used as seed. The branches, which are typically of the same stock that was imported from the Philippines, are obtained from other farmers. Sometimes, new seaweed is reported. Initial seed is sometimes from the buyers, who also provide free farming materials, ropes, and ties to farmers. Of course, the buyers can also take seed from one area to the other. When provided the farming material free of charge, the farmer has to sell the seaweed product to the particular buyer. The branches are usually used from older plants, although sometimes farmers are forced to use younger branches where there is seed scarcity. Let's look at the benefits of seaweed farming. Since its start, seaweed farming has become a very important economic activity of the coastal people, enabling them to purchase essential needs for their daily lives. The income from seaweed farming has empowered farmers to improve their standard of living by paying for school needs for their children, including fees and uniforms, buy household items, improve their house, and even build new homes, as well as get food for the families. This has given the women recognition and power within the family and the society by joining the men in becoming breadwinners, while the husbands were skeptical of the idea of their wives farming seaweed. They became more supportive when they saw the result of their wives' effort. Although most men do not farm seaweed, they help their wives in such activities such as harvesting when there are large amounts of seaweed to be harvested, carrying wet seaweed from the farm to the drying places, and carrying dry seaweed to the point of sale. Children help in such activities as tying branches to lines and home harvesting during weekends and school holidays. Though seaweed farming is more of a family activity than the work of an individual, this gives the women more courage to continue with the seaweed farming business. Seaweeds can endure a certain level of turbidity, but they are vulnerable to high turbidity caused by terrigenous material that can stick to the tally and induce ice. Farmers can need to regularly shake their lines to remove the silty deposit from the seaweed. It is obvious that seaweed farms are vulnerable to bad weather. To minimize its impact on the farm, it is advisable to choose sites that are sheltered wherever possible. Other than that, it is important to monitor weather forecast, and if the forecast is threatening, then farmers should mobilize and harvest the available seaweed to avoid any loss, and replace the stock with smaller cuttings. By far, the biggest losses from grazing of the seaweed crop is to herbivorous fish, often rabbit fish, Seaweed. Although normally this is only a seasonal problem, these fish usually shelter around rocks and coral bunnies, and therefore the only mitigation available to avoid locating seaweed plots close such features. The long line technique, which sets lines a few meters below the surface, is less vulnerable. Grazing represents a real but relatively minor loss of production to plots of mature seaweed, but nurseries can be more vulnerable and suffer greater losses. All seaweed farming is of varieties of just two species, Carpaccius alvari and Cottony, Euchemia denticularum spinosum. Different strains of seaweed do not share the same biological features. Some strains are better adapted, for example, higher water temperatures, but at the same time may have lower growth rates. All the strains currently cultivated in Nigeria originate from the Philippines and Indonesia because their growth rates are better than the native strains. If investors or farmers wish to reintroduce new strains and or species, then environmental assessment will be necessary. In a recent example from Kenya, the process took 18 months to complete. In general, diversifying the species strains used for seaweed production is not straightforward and requires full participation of buyers and the relevant government ministries, as well as significant level of competence. In making the choice of site, as well as needing suitable environmental conditions for the growth of seaweed, the socioeconomic characteristics of the local population and their ability and willingness to work on the farms are essential to consider. What are their needs? What other marketable resources are available? Are individuals and families willing to work hard? And what are the main characteristics relating to power relation, wealth distribution, ethnic mix of village? These are some of many questions that are better dealt with before investing in farming begins rather than after. A good example of the intense competition between buyers of seaweed is found in Nigeria. Here, the investors who have provided training materials, drying tables, and boats often see their constructed farmers sell the seaweed for a better price to Chinese buyers who themselves have invested nothing. This behavior can lead to the allocation of input and support from the investors and a reduction in overall production for a government. However, it is not easy to manage a sector in which the actors have such diverse interests. However, as far as possible, the government should also try to partner with the stakeholders to support development of coherent sectors plans where the interests of all parties are taken into all, allowing the sector to flourish.
Many thanks for staying with us on Agriculture Research Council of Nigerian Television. The program has been quite amazing. I'm sure you must have learned that you can actually go into seaweed farming. And the interesting thing about seaweed farming is the fact that it doesn't need fertilizer, pesticide, or whatsoever it is you need to go into farming. You just find a sea, or rather deep water, so you can actually venture to it. So I'm looking forward to seeing your feedback on our comment section on YouTube, or better say call on the station, so you can tell us how you are able to use this material to make good use of it so as to be self-sufficient in terms of agriculture. See you some other time. Bye for now.